More folks joining us. Thank you. We may start just a couple of minutes late. I think we'll try to keep it at an hour, but if you have questions, so there is a chat feature. So if you have questions, be sure to hit the chat, talk to us. I'll see the chat questions. If not, I've got somebody who's running this whole thing, and she'll see the questions and she'll come and let me know. So we're going to get started in just a couple more minutes. But we'd like this to be very interactive. And so if you've got questions, go ahead and type that into the chat. We're going to give you some websites and ways to get hold of people. And we're hoping to have a lot of fun. I got two people on here that like to laugh and smile, and we've generally had a pretty good time so far. Just a couple of more minutes. I see more people are signing on, so that's great. Good to have you. Glad to have you here this morning. I think all three of us are kind of used to doing in-person presentations. We're getting better at doing things a different way. And there's a question about whether or not people will continue to do this in the future, and I think the answer is probably.
Most likely, yeah.
All right, I think it's time to get going.
Okay.
So, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here. Glad to have you with us. I'm Mark White. I'm an attorney here at Idaho Estate Planning. I think I'm supposed to say the founder and president as well, but you know, it's not a big, we're not a big company. So it's just me and a team that we've handpicked and been together for quite a while. So glad to have you here. This morning, we're doing a series of these. This is the first one, so we're glad to have you here for the first one. Encourage you to hang around. Join us for the second one, Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. I'll say a little bit more about that towards the end of this. Our theme here in the office for the year is no place like home. And what we've been talking about with our clients is aging in place. That's what a lot of people call it. I think when I'll introduce Dee in just a minute, but when we finish, you'll see that aging in place doesn't necessarily mean what people think it means. So we're gonna talk about that. So joining me, this is Dee Childers. This is the divine Dee Childers. She's with Life Changes Elder Care Counseling. I'm not going to go into your full biography, Dee. Can I suffice it to say that your career has always been working with people?
Always.
And that presents its own set of challenges, but has given you, I think, a lot of background for helping, especially families, to, you know, maneuver through some of these things that they find out, like, right at the very time they need a lot of help, or they realize they need a lot of help. They for the first time are considering some things, and you guide them or help them to consider everything, not just what they want to think about. Did I say that right?
You did. And help them assess the situation so they get an accurate picture of what's going on, not just their perception. Yeah.
You mean our perception is different maybe than what's really going on?
There's a lot of realities out there.
I can't imagine that at all. Also joining us from the financial side of things is Justin Walker. Justin is with the Adelant Financial Group. And Justin, a lot of financial advisors tend to sell things. And sometimes that works really well. Justin's not really into that. Justin is about helping people accomplish what they want to. So Justin does a very similar thing, Dee. He does a lot of consulting, a lot of talking, asking them where they want to be, what they want to accomplish, and then helps them to make smart money decisions to get from here to there. Did I say that okay, Justin?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Very good. Very good. So to get started, I was going to have Dee and then Justin spend just a few minutes talking about their view of what it is that we're doing. Then we're going to jump into this. I have some questions, some comments, some thoughts. And then again, as you hear something and you go, whoa, I'd like to know a little bit more about that, join us on the chat. Just type that in and we'd be glad to handle questions. We'd love this to be very interactive today. My experience over the years is if people are participating, they're going to get more out of it and remember it a little bit longer. And I just feel better about myself.
It's always nice to have participation.
Yes. Yes. So, Dee, visit with us a little bit. I know we were talking before we got on, you know, we kind of have this thought in our head about what aging in place is. And we might not be thinking in the right direction on that.
Right. So many people think that aging in place is strictly about the home that you've always lived in, and that's aging in place. And really, aging in place is aging wherever you want to be. And so getting some clarity around that, there's lots of reasons to stay in your own home, but there's a lot of reasons to consider other alternatives. Cost of help, cost of care, all of those things can play into it. And we have to kind of budget and figure out a variety of options because none of us really know exactly how this path is going to go, what the journey is. So I'm helping people navigate that from the perspective of what they want, what's most important to them, and then how do we help them get there with it, knowing that there's always surprises along the way. You know, personally, I've lived in many houses, so I'm not really attached to one house, but I want a much smaller house as I start to think about, you know, retirement in 5 or 6 years. I don't want all the yard. I don't want all the house. So I'm willing to give up this house for more freedom and less responsibility. And so it's helpful for people to open up their minds and think a little wider about what aging in place might look like.
We had a situation, actually we've had this 3 times. We had a lady that was in it was a nice home. She raised her kids. There are 3 kids in there. Husband passed away, but this, you know, this meant a lot to her to be there. It was 4,500 square feet.
Oh my.
One little lady. That was an awful lot. Mm-hmm. So we talked about that and we said, now, this is a big house. Have you thought maybe about selling it because it's a financial asset too? We'll talk to Justin in a minute about that. And so it's a financial asset as well. Have you thought about selling it? Oh no, I could never do that. I'm hanging on to it for the kids. Because, you know, this is the kids. I want the kids to have it. I said, well, great. Can I call the kids? Would it be all right if I talk to them? And sure enough, called them up. Hey, mom's hanging on to the house. Do you want the house? Oh, no, I live in Chicago. I'm not moving back to Boise. I don't need the house. And the other 2, his 2 sisters said the same thing. So she was hanging on to the house for the kids. And yeah, they were great. They said, but you know what? I can always drive by. If I want to show my kids where I grew up, I can drive by. Yeah. Well, and you would think, okay, that sealed the deal, right? Mm-hmm. She understood now. She wasn't hanging on to it for the kids. Nope. We still had an issue with that. Mm-hmm. And I know you understand this, but 4,500 square feet in a big yard was just killing her. It was hard work.
And a financial drain, because that's a lot of money to maintain.
Yeah. Okay, so Justin, house is one of the assets. talk to us a little bit about preparing for this financially.
Well, from a financial standpoint, we typically want to start doing planning as soon as possible for these types of things. I always tell people it's one thing to be in control of our situation, maybe where we want to spend the rest of our lives. You know, most people enjoy their independence. Taking a driver's license away from a loved one is probably one of the hardest things that happens. Also taking them away from their home, the psychology of knowing what they're connected to and that kind of thing. So the more planning we can do from a financial standpoint, the more options we can have in the future. And in conjunction with the legal planning side, there's a lot of things that we can do to play the game, if you will, and make sure that we can have plenty of assets and or options so that we can choose to be where we want to be and be around those who we love, you know, in the later years.
And Justin, I've seen a very similar thing as to the house when I'm dealing with some older folks as we're making plans because it's kind of late in the game. There's a particular generation, some people call it the silent generation, some call it the greatest generation. It is ingrained in their DNA to leave something to the kids. It's just, I've driven myself crazy trying to understand that and explain that to people. But there may be financial assets that they could use, but you don't know how many times there was an account or there were significant assets we couldn't use those. No, we can't use those. Those are important. We can't. Those are for the kids. I got to have those for the kids. So yeah. It's kind of like the house. I'm hanging on to it for the kids. Any thoughts or ideas on the folks that are doing that?
Yeah, most everybody, and we talk a lot about this with our clients, but you know, the team of professionals that we work with, whether it's on the legal side or the CPA side, there's a lot more effective ways to transfer money, to transfer wealth to the next generation, rather than just an asset of a home or land or even IRAs. There's way easier tools and way more effective tools to pass on to the next generation. But that is a very typical conversation to have with people, because they want to leave something for the next generation. I think all of us want our kids to be better off than we were, or that we are. And so there's like this thought process that we're going to make sure that we leave some behind. But the perfect financial planning tool in our arena would be that they can spend all of their money, have the care that they need, and there still be assets to pass on by utilizing and leveraging someone else's money. And the more we can do that, the more effectively we can do that. Typically starts with earlier planning. Earlier on in life that we can do that planning, the better options we're going to have for later on wealth transfer, so on and so forth.
I'm settling for my kids just being smarter than me. Better off already just because they're smarter. But there's some challenges to that, Justin. For example, we've got an economy that we're not sure what's going to happen over the next couple of years, and we have challenges like that. Is it worth setting some priorities and you know, getting those committed maybe to paper and making sure that people understand that they're first? I know, Dee, when I work with the kids, here's what they tell me every single time. If they don't tell me this, I kick them out. We don't want the money. We don't care.
Yeah.
We don't care. We don't want it. It would be nice if we didn't have to come out of pocket to take care of mom or dad, but we don't care about the money. Please, mom and dad. Now, we hear that a lot from the kids, and I think the kids are genuine about that, at least the folks that we've been fortunate enough to work with. Is there a way, the two of you, to maybe have this conversation? Is this the point where this conversation is more with the kids than with the parent that we're working with? What do you think?
So I think it's really important for the whole group, the whole family to be together and to talk about this. You know, it's not a one-time event. This is a process. But to start the process and have conversation, and you know what people don't realize is we don't get to just we not plan for just one scenario, because unfortunately things don't go perfect. And so we kind of need to look at, you know, well, if this goes this way, what do you want? If this goes this way, what do you want? If it goes this way, what do you want? And let's get down to what's most important to you in life. And you know, most of the time we find it's things like, I want my family around me, I want my animals around me, I want to be free of pain. It's not, I want to have the biggest payroll, the bankroll. And so this is an ongoing dialogue with the family, at all the family, the key players in the family. And it's important to talk about this regularly.
Justin, I think you follow a similar model, that this is not a one-time gig. This is, we're going to meet next year, and next year we're going to handle questions in the meantime. Am I saying that right for you? This is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to plan out your financial lives for the next 12 months is hard enough, you know, and then you try to do that for the next 20 years or for the next 40 years. Things are going to change, and we have to understand that. We have to know that there's going to be adaptation that has to happen in any situation. And you know, when we meet with clients, we tell them we're going to continue to review, but we're also going to improve the situation, because it's not just about reviewing what you have, it's about also improving it, making adjustments and tweaks as we go on, because our lives might change. In fact, if there's one thing we know for sure, it's going to change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the theme that I'm hearing from both of you, and it's the same in our office, and that is going back to, what are your values?
Mm-hmm.
And Justin, I know it's the same thing. What are your values? What is most important? If it's living closer to the kids, then how do we make that happen? If, you know, and I'm going to cop to a plea here of guilty. Man, when I was younger and I was working with older people, and yes, older women in particular, they were so worried about their pets, right? Mm-hmm. This was just incredible how tight they were with their pets. And I, you know, I've always had dogs, but I was kind of like, you know, it's just a dog. Anyhow, we won't go there.
We learn a lot as we get older, don't we?
Yeah. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. I had one lady that wanted to be buried, or have her dog buried with her.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And yes, I did ask. Well, or I said, well, let's hope that the dog is dead by then.
Oh my.
The kids thought it was funny. Anyhow, but those are some things that, unless we know those, unless we have that understanding. And so, Justin, I'm sure that there's some folks on here, some financial folks that are sitting here going, I got a plan for a dog or a cat or something. And the answer is?
Potentially. I mean, depending on what the client wants and what they're after. I mean, we've seen some crazy things put into trusts, what people want to have happen with their assets when they're gone. I had one lady that left her church all of her money and left each of her kids $1. And I kind of don't want to be there when that happens. So I'm glad the attorney has to do that. However, those things happen, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we know who treated her better.
Well, yeah, but you know, that isn't always the case.
True.
I know some families, I have a client who did that because the kids didn't get along well.
Mm-hmm.
So he just took it all out of their hands and said, I'm going to give this to my church. And, you know, the kids are going to get a I love you and a few bucks. And he said, you know what? I had to earn my way. I think that's an important legacy. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, the kids aren't going to be thrilled, Justin. I know that. I know they're not going to be thrilled. But
Well, you know, Mark, if I could just real quick, unfortunately, I hear it the other way too, where the kids are, no, we don't want to spend that money on mom and dad because that's our inheritance. And that's the one that just pisses me off to no end. It's like, no, this is their money for their retirement. And so, you know, again, having conversations with kids and family members about that kind of stuff early on. What are the goals? And parents that don't say, hey, you need to understand, I'm saving for my end of life or my life, and what's left, I hope there's some left, but no promises.
yeah, we have kicked some kids out of conversations. I had a gentleman who, actually it was a sister, I think, said it first. Well, you know, I want my money now.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped and I said, well, it's not your money, and it's time for you to leave this conversation. And I don't know that he caught on, but yeah, that's difficult. So all three of us get put in that situation where we have to have a conversation around who's our client,
Yep.
who's the important person in this conversation, in this discussion, in this effort, who's the most important. Other than starting soon and continuing to have the conversation. Do you have any other thoughts or ideas that we can share with the professionals, like the folks listening today, that they can then turn around and take back as they're working with families? Any other thoughts? Starting soon, I get that. Ongoing conversation, I get that. Dee, anything you want to add to that conversation?
Yeah, is to inform yourself. I mean, people get all freaked out what an assisted living looks like because they think of the old nursing home, you know, and the old nursing home evolved from the almshouse. They were poorhouses. Trust me, assisted livings are not like that anymore. They are really very nice. Even the least expensive of them are very nice. And so don't be afraid. Just go educate yourself. They're always open for tours. They welcome, they'll feed you, you know, go be informed. and food is important. So have a meal on them. But check them out. You don't, you know, it's like shopping for a car. You have a whole lot more power when you're shopping for a car when you're not intending to buy one today. You know, if you want a car today, then you got to do something, but do it while there's less pressure on you, and it makes it easier. And we have great resources that we can provide about, here's the things to look for when you go shopping. But educate yourself early.
We, with my mother-in-law, who, as we started into the Alzheimer's cycle, Dad was trying to take care of her. We finally got to the point where he realized that wasn't going to happen. So we went to a couple, well, we didn't go. My wife took them to a couple of places. And one place, fed them. They went for lunch. They came and they brought lunch, and my mother-in-law raised 8 kids. So they said, what would you like for, it's dinner, at noontime it's dinner. That's the big meal of the day. So what would you like? And she said, well, what do you have left over? What do you have left over? and the poor little guy says, no, I got everything. Do you want the fish? Do you want the ham? What would you like? And she says, oh yeah, well, I'd like the fish. And then they came by with the dessert tray. Well, what do you have left over? He goes, no, I got everything. What would you like? And then she stood up when she was done, and she started to pull the dishes together. And my wife's going, Mom. No, you don't need to do that. They take care of that. They do that for you. And my mother-in-law looked at my wife and said, I'm going to like it here.
Nice.
So yes. And maybe you could go scout it out. That's fine, but take Mom with you. Have Mom take a look and see what's going on.
You know,
And
I just am dealing with the situation right now with a client who I consider very educated, very knowledgeable, and just dumbfounded that they started with me and then they kind of disappeared. And the next thing I knew, mom was in assisted living and she was so pissed. And we have done nothing but the next 3 weeks to try and clean up the mess because she never went. She didn't have a choice about where she went. She was ready to go, but they didn't give her a choice. And you can't do that to adults. You cannot do that. So yes, mom needs to go with you. Mom or dad needs to be part of the decision-making process. This is not done to them. They're not children.
well, and a suggestion is, and I know this is a little bit different where my in-laws live, they knew somebody everywhere they went. You know, they ran into people that they knew. Oh, there's Bob and Lois. Let's go talk to them. How you guys doing? Great. How do you like this place? Oh, it's wonderful. You love it. They take care of it.
Nice.
So Justin, the same thing. In addition to starting soon and then an ongoing conversation, what else can you add to that?
Just education, right? Education and communication. Make sure you surround yourself with people who know more than you do. You know, I think I think one of the best things that we can do in life is surround ourselves with people that are smarter than us and that know more about a situation, whether it be law or whether it's taxes or, you know, assisted living. I mean, the reality is we don't know everything. And so the more we can educate ourselves and be around people and, you know, agencies that can help us, that'll be hugely beneficial for all people involved, because the communication that can stay open between, you know, a parent and a son or a daughter or the children, and the communication that can stay open, I think it's imperative to understand all of those, you know, throughout that whole process.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yes.
That's not a sit down this afternoon and we got it figured out.
No.
That takes time.
It does. It takes time, and I think it forces us to look at things. Sometimes we're easy to run away from our problems. We're easy to run away from things that maybe scare us. And I think we have to have courage to look at these things. You know, I have clients that will not even look at their statements of their investment accounts. They're scared to look at them. Well, we still have to look, because we have to make changes. We might have to make changes. Maybe we don't want to look at our estate plan, our trust. You know, maybe that scares us. Talking about end of life, that scares us. But the better we can have, you know, the more open communication we can have, the better off we'll be. And those courageous conversations will change the outcome of any of those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly for me, because I'm in the business, so I don't find it as that hard to have the conversation around end of life and your planning and that. But what's really interesting is I finally get some parents that will have the conversation. They'll walk in and say, hey, listen, we got to do this. We got to do this. And then I always like to bring the kids in, have a family meeting and walk through this. You don't know how many kids don't want to have that conversation.
Right.
They just don't want to think about it. They don't want to deal with it. And I'm sitting there go, well, listen, your parents did a great thing. We really need to have this conversation and move this forward. So Justin, yeah, thank you. That is difficult. It is not hard for me to surround myself with people that are smarter than me. That's really easy. But the real answer is all of us can find people that can help out. And it's not just smarter, I think, Justin. It's not just find somebody smarter. I've been in my business for 35 years. I quit saying I've seen everything, because as soon as you say that, you see something else and you're just, oh my goodness. But we've seen a few things. And I know, Dee, you've worked with enough people to kind of see how people make decisions and how they think through things. And I know that you get involved with some mediation. You're sitting there trying to work some things out. Experience adds quite a bit to this. It's not just this person is smarter, it's this person has some experience. And so, Justin, I think that's really true, especially for folks that maybe are newer to the business. You know what, I've not done this before, I've not seen this before. Man, get on the phone. I can tell you this from the legal side, there are very few attorneys in the Valley that I could not pick up the phone and say, hey, this is a situation that I've got. What do you think? They're just, I don't know who they are, but there are very few that would say, well, I'm not talking to you. I don't care what you're doing. Oh my gosh, there's so many that would get on the phone and talk to you. I think it's the same thing with the financial area as well. I don't think there's very few that wouldn't get on the phone with you and say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think that most everybody wants to be helpful, you know, in any situation. And if you call with, you know, if you're talking to somebody, in a colleague or whatever, I think that there's going to be some collaboration that can happen there for the better of that client.
Yeah. Again, so if you're newer to the industry or the business and you're thinking, well, I don't know that, you can know it pretty quick. And Dee, I know all the people that you know. And there isn't anybody in there. I can't think of a single person that I've ever had an issue with. They would all talk to you. They would, and if they don't know the answer, they know 5 people that they will refer you to and say, well, listen, you should talk to so-and-so. I just know that side of the business, very helpful.
Well, and very collaborative. We use each other all the time because, you know, there's so many communities, there's so many skilled nursing facilities. It's like, all right, what's going on right now? Who are you having good success with? Who are you having issues with? And we use that to make sure that we give our clients the best possible care and advice. And so, yes, it's an incredible community because we're just very open about helping each other out. And because the ultimate objective is to help our clients out, and that's all of our goal, is to help our clients. So it doesn't matter who has the answer.
Okay, so let's kind of recap up to this point, because then I want to go and maybe not a different direction, but go at it a little bit differently. So up to this point, for us, when somebody says, I want to age in place, or there's no place like home, we understand that that may not be the house that they're in at this very moment. We might understand that. They may not. we understand, but we also understand, Dee especially, that it doesn't have to be that house to still be home, to be their place. And so that's the first thing, is maybe helping people to understand it doesn't need to be the 4,500 square foot older home. I mean, the issues there can be overwhelming. It may not be safe. My mom bought a little place that had stairs up the front and stairs in the garage into the kitchen. There was no handrail in there. There was nothing in that place that she bought that made it safer for her. So how do you address that?
Well, you know, so one of the best ways that we can help families is when we, often parents or their senior person that they're caring for doesn't want to share all of the information. So one of the best things that we can do is just come in and be an independent party that does a full assessment. And we look at all areas of life, and we're looking at what's going well, what are the areas that need to be shored up, and what do we need to be potentially planning for, and come back with a plan, a full assessment for them. I mean, most of us, if we are going to have some car work done, we want an assessment of what's the issue and what's going right with our car. So we do that for people. It's called a geriatric assessment. And then make recommendations for what needs to be shored up. So not only what needs to be done, but resources for who can do that. So that's a home safety assessment. And you know, we have a checklist, you know, are there grab bars by the shower? Are there, you know, how short is their toilet? I mean, you'd be amazed how many times toilets are the issue. So people that do this regularly, I mean, it just clicks off in our mind as we walk through a house and assess, you know, get those rugs, those throw rugs up off the floor because they're such a huge trip hazard. But people that do this all the time, it's just second nature, but having somebody like that come in and give you an independent assessment is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Some people are fortunate enough to live in their home till they pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens. But to do that, again, takes the planning. Like you said, it's the understanding up front, what's the plan, how do we get there? You got to get the right people into the home to look at it and assess it, and absolutely make it safe. And I know that's difficult for people to kind of let go of that and let somebody come in and tell them that it's a great little home. You've done a marvelous job, but here's some things we could do, you know, to take care of that. So again, we're coming back to this concept of having a plan. Now, Justin talked about having the financial plan. I get that, but over here on the care side of things, that plan, I would guess most people don't have.
No. And you know, if I could, one of the things people forget or don't even think about is that if you're going to stay in your own separate home and you need care, and you need a lot of care, those caregivers are in your house all the time. They don't come and go. I mean, if you need, you know, 20, just even say during the day, 13 hours, they're in your home. When they're not doing stuff, they're sitting on their couch, on your couch, on their phone while you pay them. And people get really irritated by that, but they have to be there. So when you need to get up to go to the bathroom, they're there. If you choose to be in a community where they have help, you have your own space. It's your space, decorated the way you want, things run the way you want, and care comes into your home, maybe to help you with meds management, medication management, and then they leave and you're back to your solo place again. But so people don't really think about that one, and it's a big bother to a lot of people to have somebody in their house all the time, especially if they're not physically doing something all the time, and nobody can do that all the time. So people sit.
Yeah. So again, got to have a plan, and we got to figure out what's most important,
Right,
in order to make that happen. Justin, well, and Dee both, there's so many people that just think it's going to be cheaper if I stay in home. It's not going to cost the same as being in assisted living. Dee, I'm pretty sure you can handle the comparative there. And then Justin, is it actually cheaper to be at home? I just got a chat that said actually it can be more expensive to have care in the home, and he's suggesting anything over 8 hours a day, it's probably a wash, that it's going to be cheaper to be in. But they want to be in the home. Dee, is it cheaper?
no, well, not if you need full-time care. I've got a client right now. It's the average rate for just personal care in the home is $25 an hour. And so at 24 hours, that's $600. And then if you take that times 30 days, that's $18,000. You can live in a palace in the nicest facility in town for half of that. Less than half of that.
There was the story of the lady a couple of years ago that was on the cruise line 365 days of the year because it was cheaper.
Right.
And she had a really nice gentleman that danced with her every night.
Nice. Yeah.
But Justin, if we're at home, I think there's some expenses that we don't take into account. One is we're sitting in a financial asset. There's some equity there. We're not using that. But isn't there a cost associated with that too?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes down to, you know, what kind of assets the individual has. I mean, if they're, you know, worth $3 to $5 million, they can probably do whatever they want and not worry too much about the asset of the house. But most people aren't in that situation. Most people are living in their greatest asset from a financial standpoint. And so it does become one of those things where you have to start talking about reverse mortgages, potentially home equity lines of credit, those types of things in order to access the value of the house. If they don't move, if they run out of money, what does that look like? Does the state take over? You know, there's just all of that stuff that has to be talked about. And yeah, it can be a cost. It can be a cost. You know, if we have to sell during a 2008 market, we're going to lose value in that asset. If we're going to sell in a 2020 market in Boise, Idaho, we're going to make money on that asset. So it definitely depends on the situation for sure.
Well, and so I get that a lot. Well, I'm going to do a reverse mortgage, or I'm going to pull out, you know, an equity line of credit. But short of selling the house, you never get all of the equity out of the house. Isn't that right?
Right. Right. Yeah, you're going to be very limited on, well, you're going to be limited on how much you can pull out. Maybe it's 90% total or something like that, but you're going to be limited. And I think that it comes back to the original discussion about options. You know, if we have to do something, our options are now very limited because we have to fire sell, right? We have to do something because we don't have any other options. And talking about those things earlier on prevents some of those situations.
Or it allows us to get prepared to make the move that we need to make. So many people could sell the home and afford to be in assisted living community or an independent living community for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of that discussion that I think people need to have. And that is, yeah, I want to stay in my house because it's cheaper. Well, that might not be accurate. So we got to have that conversation. It isn't necessarily cheaper to do that. So that's part of that conversation. Justin, what else can we be looking at as far as assets and figuring out how to pay for it?
Well, I mean, if we start earlier on, I'm a big fan of insurance. Insurance in general is good, or can be really good. We can be insurance poor though too. So I think it's understanding where our asset level is at, what makes sense for each of us. But if we can leverage someone else's money, that's always a good thing. Leveraging an insurance company's money is better. And sometimes it's understanding like IRA dollars. You know, if we have to go out and start taking money at 72 out of our IRA, you know, how much money have we put away into an IRA? What are tax laws going to look like in the future? And I know enough about tax to be a little dangerous, but at the same time, we work closely with CPAs all the time to make sure that we're making good decisions about future taxation. And so if we can utilize tax dollars today in a lower tax bracket and utilize them now in order to leverage someone else's money, sometimes that's a great idea. You know, if tax brackets go up, which I'm sure they will, based on most recent economic situations that we all know about. I mean, the reality is, I think that the taxation is going to have to go up, whether it's in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, we don't know. But it may make sense to start looking at what the tax plan is of the future as well.
Well, and again, the largest asset for so many people, the house, there are some tax advantages surrounding that. For example, you can exempt a lot of the capital gains. So that's something to look at, but you got to have the conversation. That's got to be something that we're talking about. And so we got to understand Social Security. Where are you with Medicare? What's your retirement? Do you have some set aside in an IRA? Do you have a pension? You know, those are all things that people need to talk about. We've got a home. And I'm not going to sit here and say that family can't be helping out, but there's some issues with this. This is a very common plan that I see. We'll call it the no plan, but it's really, when I get there, my kids will take care of me. And then think that is how we're going to manage, and and we won't need money to do that. Dee, how accurate is that?
Well, most of the time the kids are worried about their own kids themselves. And, you know, there are some people that can afford to help, but I don't find that most kids are in a position to be able to put out money to help their parents. Now, certainly to help facilitate or be caregivers or coordinate care, medical advocates. But the kids are worrying about putting their own wealth together for their own kids and their own livelihoods. So to plan on your kids being there, I think is often a rude awakening. And sometimes a painful one, because then they find themselves having to apply potentially for Medicaid. And, you know, we're talking bare minimum. We're not talking any luxury there. We're talking bare minimum and only what's needed. So you don't get a lot of choice when you have to go there. And I think the point of what we're talking about is people want to have choice. In order to have choice, you have to have plans.
Well, and to have a plan, somebody asked this in one of the questions is, thank you for the conversation. Please describe earlier or early on. Because we keep saying, well, and that's why I was just going to say, if you've got a plan, the only way to have a plan is to sit down and have the conversation. And it's best if that conversation is at least the night before. But just when's a good time to start planning?
Well, I think that you can start planning early on, meaning, you know, 20s, 30s, 40s. I don't think you need to wait until you're 50 or 60 or even 70, you know, to start talking about these things. I think that the generation of like my parents don't talk to me about their money. I'm a financial planner and have been for 15 years. My parents still don't talk to me about money. They don't tell me what they have. They don't tell me where it's at. They don't tell me any of that. They don't tell any of their kids where it's at. And that's just kind of how they were raised. And I think that we have to be able to have open communication. And so with my kids know probably way more than they probably should. They know that we have a trust. They know that we have financials that we've put in place for certain things. They kind of understand what we make, and they understand what our debt is, and they kind of understand where we sit. And I think maybe that's just in my profession, but I think it's really, really good, really healthy for them to understand what's going on. When we make a bad decision financially, they should know. They should know what we're learning from it. When we make a good decision, they should know and they should learn. And I think that early on, really defined is continue to talk about it ongoing, you know, not just a one-time conversation, but continue to have that conversation and update each other, especially the children, of what's happening and what does it look like and what decisions might have to be made from a financial perspective. That's a lot of weight to put on a child, that now they have to make all of the financial decisions for their parents because they can't. And if they don't know what mom and dad really have, it's really hard to make those decisions. And so the sooner the better. You know, if it can be in the 30s, if it can be in their 40s, and just start planning then, great. If it's you're 75 and you haven't done any of that planning, let's start now. Let's do something, because there could be something we can make adjustments to, even from a legal standpoint today, to help that situation ongoing.
So is it an old Japanese adage that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago?
Yeah.
The second best time is right now.
Yeah.
We'll get going. So I think the answer to earlier or early on, man, 40s is not too soon. 30s is not too soon. But 50s, 60s, and 70s is not too late. It's just that we might reduce the number of options the longer, you know, we wait before we do that. Justin, there's another question here. If you can fund your own care, is it still better to leverage with insurance? That's a great question.
I think it depends on what the wealth transfer goals of that client are. You know, if they want to spend their own money and they aren't necessarily looking to transfer that wealth to the next generation. I have a lot of clients that don't want to transfer it to their kids, but they'd really like their grandkids to get money. it really does come down to how much wealth have they accumulated, and how do they want that transfer of asset to happen when they are gone. If they want to transfer assets to the next generation, I would say insurance is a great way to go. If they don't necessarily care about the transfer of asset to the next generation, then self-fund it. Spend every dime, take it down to zero before you pass away. It really does come down to the individual client, though, and what they're after.
Well, and we tend to, when we're having these conversations, we tend to think about we're all going to be old and near end of life when we need this. And the unfortunate reality of it is, and nothing's more clear than where we're at right now with the COVID, is that stuff happens at all stages of life. And so it's not just, we're not just talking end of life, we're talking about management of life. And that even with long-term care insurance, unless you buy a really huge policy, it's going to cover you for so many years, and then you're going to still go into your own pocket. So there's lots of benefits to having some contingencies out there, and to consider that as an option if it makes financial sense. But people need to realize this isn't, every time we talk about this, people think about, oh, well, that's what I'm old and before I'm going to die. And it's like, no, that is not always the case. You need to plan for life.
Well, I suppose, not to be negative about this, but I suppose if you knew exactly when you were going to die, if you knew that moment, you could delay your planning.
Exactly.
It's like deathbed repentance that we talk about. If I knew I was going to die on such and such a day, I'll repent the night before, and I'll be good when I die. There's a couple of problems with that, but one of them is we don't know when that's going to be. Now, we're running out of time. This is a little unfair, but it's my question. People in general seem to have a real issue with the P word, and that is planning. They just seem to have an incredible issue with planning. I can't get them to sit down and do this. The estate planning, I know, just people won't do it. Justin, you see it on your side, the financial planning, getting people to sit down and do some financial planning. What percentage of the situations that you get involved with is actually doing the planning, the pre-planning, if you will, the planning before they need all this? Any suggestions, thoughts, brilliance on how to get people to plan?
One of the kind of benign tools that's out there that is incredibly helpful and might be an easy way into the conversation is called the Go Wish game. And the Go Wish game, so when I work with a family, I have like 8 decks of cards, and we sit around the room and we do the Go Wish game. But you can do it online. Just type in Go Wish game and you can go do this yourself. But you have about 50 cards with priorities, and then you sort them into what's most important, what's somewhat important, what's least important. And you have to get down to the top 10. And then you have conversations around that with everybody. And I'm always amazed how many family members go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. And I've had adult sons come to tears over this, because it was just a conversation that needed to have. And so one of the easy ways into planning is just to have some conversation about what's most important to you. And then you can say, well, if that's most important, we need to put in some other steps. We need to plan some other things so that we can make sure that happen. We need to get to the attorney. We need to get to the financial advisor. So let's just talk about what's most important first.
Okay, but don't use that P word again.
Oh, sorry. Planning.
Arrange. do some pre-arrangements. I guess that sounds like a funeral, doesn't it? Some
Yeah,
funeral
let's think through this.
pre-arrangement. I don't know. Justin, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think that if you can have the conversation about what plans, what options are always good. Most people are always worried about retirement. You know, at least when they come to me, right? They're always like, what can we do for retirement purposes? How can we plan for retirement? So on and so forth. And then we have clients that when they get to retirement, they don't want to spend that money. They've spent their whole life saving for retirement, and now they're supposed to spend it in retirement. And so a lot of times there's a lot of emotional connectivity to that money, that when clients go to start spending it, not just in retirement, but also if they have to spend it for things that they weren't expecting, becomes very psychologically draining and emotionally draining for those people. And so helping people understand why they do what they do with their money is one of the most important things we can do as financial planners. And I think that the money psychology of it is so important, because if we understand why somebody wants to do something or what's most important to them, it will help with every part of their planning, whether it's, you know, end of life, or whether it's they have a disability that happens at age 55 and they need care for the next 30 years. You know, what does that look like? What are some of the options, and making sure that we understand the psychology of it.
Very good. Listen, we want to crank this down. Any parting shots? And as you take parting shots, please tell us how to contact you. Let us know what we need to do to get hold of you. Dee, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks, Mark. So Life Changes Elder Care Consulting is the business. Website is lifechangeseldercare.com. And so we have lots of resources on the website. You can get a hold of us through the website. You can schedule a free consultation with me through the website. You can also give me a call at 208-321-5567, extension 2, which is also on the website. But I'm always happy to do a free consult and just help people get oriented and just to start having the conversation. So we've got lots of tools and lots of resources. Happy to share that with people.
Very good. Thank you. Justin.
Yeah, my name is Justin Walker, and we are with Adelant Smart Money Strategies. You can contact us at our website, which is myAdelant, ADALANT. Adelant is not spelled correctly in the Spanish language, at least for what it means in Spanish, but it means to move forward or progress. And that's what we help each of our clients do. Each of our initial consults are free to meet with clients and to look at where they've been and where they're at, where they want to go financially speaking. And we love to help clients arrange whatever it is that they're trying to get done, whether it's retirement planning or whether it's, you know, wealth management. And our phone number at our office is 208-724-2291. And we'd love to talk to you and figure out how we can put together an arrangement or plan or whatever you want to call it for your future.
Yeah, an arrangement. We're going to position. We're going to position ourselves.
Yes.
We're going to position assets. We're going to position the kids. Whatever. I'm sorry. Well, thank you so much, Dee, Justin, for being with us today. I'm Mark White, Idaho Estate Planning. This is a first one. There's 4 of these that we're doing. Actually, Justin and I will be back together next week, and we're going to get a little more in depth into some of the financial issues. Thursday, though, 10 o'clock, if you haven't registered for it. We're going to be visiting with Jeff Weiberg of Family Resource Home Care. And then one of my favorites, Brittany Foster from Regency Columbia Village. And Dee, we're going to follow up a little bit on the discussion of, should we be home getting some care? Should we be looking at assisted living? What are some of the issues in the discussion? So join us. That's Thursday, this Thursday at 10 o'clock. And if you aren't registered for that, I know we sent out a bunch of stuff. When I say we, I don't mean me. Somebody did. But if you go to our website or if you send us an email, we'll get you connected to that. Everybody have a great day. It looks gorgeous out there. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this helped you a little bit as you work with your people. And I call them my people. I hope you call them your people, and that you take responsibility for them, because that's how I do it. I know that's how Dee does it. And I know Justin is the same way. So when we work with our people, I hope this helps you a little bit. Take care.
Thanks so much, Mark, for putting this together.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.